Good evening, and thanks for attending the 2021 Queen's Power 100 event, recognizing the biggest political players in the world's borough. I'm Zach Williams, Senior State Politics Reporter at City and State. So much has happened over the past year, don't have to tell all you that. So it's really great to have a time to highlight the people who are really making things happen at such an important time in the history of Queens, the city, the state, the world. But before we jump into our keynote speakers, I would like to recognize our wonderful, great sponsors. We could not have put on this wonderful event without them. They include Resorts World Casino New York City, New Reformers, and IUOE Local 14. Again, in lieu of audience applause, I'll just give them a little clap from my apartment here. Thank you so much for sponsoring this great event. And now, without further ado, I would love to introduce our first keynote speaker, Bob DeSalvio. He's president of Genting America's East, and he has a little something to share to set things off. Bob?
Thanks, Zach, and good evening, everyone. Thank you to City and State New York for the opportunity to speak with you all today. As Zach mentioned, I'm Bob DeSalvio and currently hold the position of president of Genting America's East, where I'm responsible for overseeing Genting properties in New York, in Florida, in Massachusetts, and in Bimini, Resorts World New York City, Resorts World Bimini. It's a real privilege to speak to you and to be among such an impressive group of government officials, healthcare professionals, business executives, nonprofit leaders, union leaders, advocates, and activists representing our Queens community. Resorts World New York City has been a proud and constant partner to the Queens community for over 10 years now that we've been in operation, employing an all-union workforce of nearly 1,000 people and donating millions to local charities and contributing more than $3 billion to New York City's public schools. The past 14 months has surely been a challenge. We all know when the pandemic hit Queens early, and it really hit hard. With positivity rates dropping and vaccination rates increasing, COVID seems to be under control in the city, but it has had devastating economic consequences that still remain. As business forced to close its doors during the pandemic, we recognize the economic impact of COVID-19 had on the local business community. In the face of those challenges, I know Queens will once again recover and rebuild just as it did after Hurricane Sandy. Resorts World New York City stood with Queens in 2012, providing hot meals to those displaced by Sandy, hosting staging events for emergency vehicles, and even temporarily storing over 7,000 trees that came down during the storm on our property. And they used it as a staging area, so we were happy to help. Resorts World New York City stood with Queens also in 2020, hosting a COVID-19 testing and vaccination center and an early voting center as well. We donated to Fuel the Front Lines to provide thousands of meals for hospital workers and donated to Jamaica Hospital Medical Center in the height of the pandemic. And we stand with Queens today to again rebuild and reinvest in our community. Economic development is at the core of what our business is all about and our community giving. Now more than ever, we recognize the importance of nurturing local businesses and creating new employment opportunities for our local residents. It's imperative that we begin to move beyond the last year and the devastating impact it had on our borough. And with that in mind, we look forward to the grand opening this summer of our new $400 million addition to the property, featuring the Hyatt Regency JFK at Resorts World New York. It's an 8-story, 400-room hotel. When it opens, it'll feature residential-inspired guest rooms, premium suites, new restaurants, state-of-the-art conference and meeting facilities, retail options, and additional gaming areas. The resort will seamlessly feature a variety of non-gaming amenities to complement the most innovative gaming products and entertainment offerings, allowing guests of all interests and budgets to experience everything that kind of fits their personal taste. The hotel addition is estimated to create many more good-paying careers and jobs for New Yorkers and additional revenue for the public schools as well. The opening of this summer, the Hyatt Regency marks another step in our longtime goal of creating a full-scale entertainment and hospitality destination right here in Queens, driving tourism, employment opportunities, and community investment. As we move through the economic recovery, Resorts World New York City will continue to identify initiatives that elevate our local businesses. When we reopened in September of 20, we developed a community partner program, and it offers free advertising and exposure to hundreds of local small businesses. And in exchange, they give exclusive discounts to the holders of our Genting rewards cards. The program helped to generate traffic to businesses that have been devastated by the events of the last year. All of you are encouraged to join. It's free and gives your business exposure to hundreds of thousands of people via our website, email, regular mail, and advertising at our Queens property. And you can go to rwnewyork.com. It has all the information online. And by creating new employment opportunities and investing in our community, we will transform the economic environment in our city and pave the path to recovery. We like to say at Resorts World, we are Queens, we are New York. Thank you.
Resorts World New York City, where New Yorkers play. 6,500 slots. Stay and play. Resorts World New York City.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. That was really great. And I'll give him credit for really knowing his audience. You know, again, Queens has gone through so much over the past year, the epicenter of the pandemic early on. And our next speaker is a great example of somebody who not only has had a huge role in the government doings here in Queens and in the state, but also some firsthand experience with the pandemic itself. And that, of course, is Rick Cotton, Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who was the first prominent New Yorker to catch COVID-19. And I'm just so glad that it looks like all went well for him recovering from that. And here he is, ready to give us a few more remarks for our great event. Rick?
Thank you, Zach. I'm also happy to report to you that I have fully recovered. It was quite a shock for me so early on, but the region has suffered. As you have pointed out, Queens has suffered. We all have suffered in our personal lives, but I'm delighted to be here with everyone, although virtually. Hopefully soon we can be back on the soil of Queens to see each other in person. Today, what I do want to do is focus on Queens, focus on our facilities in Queens, obviously the two airports, LaGuardia and JFK. Before I do that, I do want to touch on COVID-19. How can one not, given what the last year has put us all through? I'm happy to report that all of the Port Authority facilities have remained open and operating. We have had the most stringent health and safety protocols in place across all of our facilities, particularly the airports, face coverings, enhanced cleaning and disinfecting, physical distancing, plexiglass barriers, contactless technologies. We've actually restricted individuals at our airport terminals to passengers and employees. The list you can see on the screen. And what the punchline here is that all of our airports have earned COVID-19 health and safety accreditations, that is for having the highest possible standards from two of the leading global airport accreditors. We're very proud of that. Now, that's obviously not to say that there haven't been dramatic impacts to the Port Authority facilities. At the beginning, back in March and April of 2020, our airports were down 98% in terms of passenger volume. Our commuter railroad path was down 95%. Our bridges and tunnels, traffic there was down 62%, and the seaport was off 17%. Now, happily, we've recovered somewhat, but certainly not entirely. Our airports are still down. This is 12 months, 14 months after the pandemic began, down by 52%. Our path ridership is still down 72%. Our bridges and tunnels have recovered to a major extent, but they're still down 5% compared to pre-COVID levels. And our seaport, the cargo supply lines have proved very resilient, is now and has been for the last 6 months above pre-COVID levels, but the financial damage is continuing. In the first 9 months of the pandemic, our revenues were down $1.7 billion. As we sit here today, over the 24-month period beginning in the second quarter of last year, we will have lost operating revenue of $3 billion. And what that does, because every penny that our revenue exceeds our expenses goes to our capital plan, has reduced significantly our capital capacity, which is a terrible thing for the region. It means that we can't pursue our goal of 21st century infrastructure, and we can't contribute as much as we otherwise would to the recovery that the region so desperately needs. Federal aid has been far less than enough even to come close to offsetting our revenue loss. It's below 25% of our revenue loss, and we have been advocating for federal aid, and we are focused on the federal infrastructure bill that is now being debated in Washington. Now, despite the impacts of COVID, to the extent that we have had construction projects underway, we have continued those. So when we talk about LaGuardia, I should say where the big picture here is that our ambitions are to have an unprecedented rebuild of all 3 of our major airports. And that doesn't mention our ambitions at the bus terminal, the George Washington Bridge, and other of our key infrastructure projects. But let's turn to our airport projects in Queens. Our framework here is 21st century global standard facilities. We want best-in-class technology. We want best-in-class sustainability and environmental protection features in the context of appealing civic art and architecture. We want best-in-class customer experience, state-of-the-art security, iconic local concessions, dramatically improved access to the airport, and very important, we have an overarching commitment to doing business with local businesses, to community consultation, and to doing business with minority and women-owned businesses. So let's turn to the Queens airports. We have an $8 billion LaGuardia redevelopment program that is underway, and it is in its final stages. We have to acknowledge that LaGuardia historically was awful. It was the lowest ranked in any customer survey, and we're committed to taking it from worst to best. We're doing so with 2 private sector partners, LaGuardia Gateway Partners and Delta. What you see on the screen is a rendering, but every single facility, every single building, every single concourse, every single arrivals and departures hall, every single passenger facility that you see there is being built new. The old has been torn down to the ground. There is no passenger facility that was in place historically will be left, with the exception of the Marine Air Terminal, which is landmarked. Next slide. So what you see here again is that same rendering, but now colored in red are the facilities that are already completed and open to the public. As you can see, the western half of the airport, Terminal B, is 90% complete. Next slide, please. But let's take a look at the whole new LaGuardia. A picture is worth 1,000 words. We think it's setting the standard for the region's infrastructure. Let me show you an early comment on it. New York's LaGuardia Airport like you've never seen it before. LaGuardia goes from 3rd class to world class. Hard to believe you're in LaGuardia. Disgraceful to breathtaking. LaGuardia's high-flying makeover has travelers doing double takes. Let's take a look.
Piece by piece, an entirely new LaGuardia Airport is taking shape before our very eyes as new terminals, concourses, parking garages, and roadways are replacing an old and antiquated airport that was reviled by passengers. You can see and experience the progress yourself, as 50% of the new LaGuardia, with its sleek and modern exterior, is already open to the public, a manifestation of what is to come. In June of 2020, we welcomed passengers to the extraordinary new Terminal B Arrivals and Departures Hall, part of a $4 billion project developed in partnership with LaGuardia Gateway Partners. On the opposite side of the airport, Delta is moving forward on its $4 billion Terminal C, where a second new head house will open in early 2022. Building on Governor Andrew Cuomo's vision, a whole new LaGuardia Airport will set the gold standard for the nation, a 21st century airport with a 21st century customer experience. Entering Terminal B, the first thing you'll notice is the spacious, light-filled building that is 50% larger than the dark and crowded Central Terminal built in 1964 to serve far fewer passengers. The new terminal is uplifting, with large-scale permanent artworks commissioned in consultation with the Public Art Fund that convey the spirit of New York to visitors from around the globe. At the center of the departures level, Sarah Z's floating sculpture is a monumental globe featuring 900 photos of the sky over New York. Along the largest interior wall in the terminal, Laura Owen's tiled mural is a fantasia of New York icons embedded in a billowy skyscape. Terminal B is beautiful, and it's also functional. Greatly expanded ticket counters and ample self-service kiosks add significant capacity and make for quicker check-in. Security is faster and more efficient with 3 times as many lanes as the old terminal, and cutting-edge technology for baggage screening and body scanning. After security, you'll discover a plaza on the terminal's top floor with shops and restaurants featuring iconic local brands that bring you the best of New York, from grab-and-go options to sit-down dining for when COVID restrictions are eased. An array of shops will offer everything from books to Legos to fashion to products made here in Queens. Artist Yepa Hines' interactive sculptures adorn the plaza with fanciful benches and playful mock balloons along the ceiling. At the center of the plaza, you can marvel at the laser light show projected on a floor-to-ceiling curtain of water featuring images of New York and seasonal shows, the only installation of its kind in any airport in the nation.
So that is not your mother's or your father's LaGuardia Airport. And I'm delighted to say, as I said just before the video, the early reviews are outstanding. But it is not simply the passenger facilities, it's not simply the interior, it is functionally far superior to the old LaGuardia. What I'm showing you here is the first concourse that is complete at Terminal B. And if you look at the red line, you can see that a plane at a gate has 2 ways to leave its gate. So with the new LaGuardia, you should never hear a pilot say, we can't either access our gate or get out of it because there's a plane in our way. And what that reflects is that all of the passenger facilities have been moved 600 feet closer to the Grand Central Parkway. And what you're seeing here is what we did with those 2 football fields of additional space that could now be devoted to aircraft taxiways and increasing dramatically their maneuverability. And here what you see comes from last week. It was the first airplane to go under the pedestrian sky bridge on its way from its gate out to the runways. So the schedule, whole new LaGuardia within 12 months, as we're talking today, will be substantially complete. Early 2022, Terminal B, its western concourse will be complete, and the second of 2 pedestrian skyways will complete. Over on the Delta Terminal C side, their arrivals and departures hall will complete, and the entire new roadway network of the airport will also complete. Now, just one quick word on access. Today, LaGuardia is the only East Coast airport without a direct rail mass transit link. That is completely unacceptable. It leads to it contributes to congested roadways, unreliable travel times to the airport for travelers, but the congestion also contributes to excess air pollution, greenhouse gas emission, which is a bane for the neighboring community. The solution is clear. It is the LaGuardia Air Train. It will provide a rail mass transit link, which will get people out of their cars and off local roadways. with respect to Queens, we really did create an alignment which was focused on the needs of the community. So what you see is the route that the air train will take from the airport, 2 stations, Central Hall Station and the East Station. It hugs the northern side of the 8-lane Grand Central Parkway, goes through then the median, and then directly over to land controlled by the MTA. There is no taking of private residential or commercial property, and the closest it comes to a local community is across an 8-lane highway. Now, if we look at the broader picture here, the airport is outlined in blue. You can see the red line of the air train going any other way, would have involved heavy construction through the community, and we were not about to impose that on Queens. Next slide, please. So shifting from LaGuardia to JFK, we have major ambitions there. Just recall, in terms of JFK today, you can see here in the red squares show literally vacant terminal sites. The yellow identify undersized and outdated terminals. We intend to use those 5 locations, that is the 3 outsized and undersized, outdated and undersized terminals will be torn down. The 2 vacant sites will be employed, and together we will have 4 different projects aimed at transforming Kennedy into one unified airport. Now, the challenge has been that COVID arrived and handicapped our efforts. Next slide, please. So the one terminal, Terminal 8, which will house American Airlines and British Airways, actually we completed the deal and they had their groundbreaking just before COVID hit. So that $344 million expansion and renovation should be completed at the very end of next year. It is underway. In fact, I was out there this morning and they're making good progress. Now, more recently, we succeeded in striking a new deal with Delta and JFK IAT with respect to Terminal 4. That deal had been fully negotiated. It was ready for its financial close and moving forward in April of 2020, but unfortunately COVID intervened. But we have renegotiated a revised deal. It is a 60% in terms of its initial phase, a 60% reduction due to the COVID impacts. But there we are targeting, and Delta and JFK IAT are targeting a completion in late 2023. That is now going to be a reality. The challenge that remains is Terminal 1 and Terminal 6. Again, these 2, very frustrating. These 2 deals were completely negotiated, ready to go in February. Then the COVID hit. So the COVID crisis has forced us into a renegotiation and an effort in terms of trying to get these deals underway. And all I can say is stay tuned. Finally, I want to turn to a discussion of both LaGuardia and JFK in terms of our focus on local businesses, MWBEs, local hiring, and community engagement. 2 broad objectives: ensure economic benefits of our redevelopments accrue to the surrounding communities, and achieve a nation-leading 30% MWBE contracting goal. At LaGuardia, I'm pleased to say, here are results as a result of the current project. More than 1.7 billion with a B, in contracts to MWBE firms, $700 million in contracts to Queens-based businesses, and as a result of our focused effort, hundreds of local Queens residents hired at the airport. We are committed with respect to the air train, the LaGuardia Air Train project, which is pending FAA final approval, to attain at least $500 million in further contracting opportunities with MWBE firms and local firms, and 80% local hiring target for operating jobs with a minimum of $50 million invested in local parks in the course of the project. But that's not all. In April 2019, we opened a new Council for Airport Opportunity office in Corona, Queens. We formed local outreach partnerships with Elm Corps and NHS, both local Queens organizations. And to date, more than 250 Queens residents have been placed into LaGuardia jobs, and that number will only increase. In December, we opened the Port Authority's new community office in East Elmhurst. So far, 11 Queens high schoolers awarded full tuition scholarships to Vaughn College with, I might say, a commitment from the Port Authority to assure that they have jobs at the Port Authority offered to them following their graduation, and 150 Queens students in grades 6 to 8 placed in summer STEM education programs. Now at JFK, we're going to outdo that, and we're going to outdo that with the extraordinary leadership of Congressman Gregory Meeks and Queens Borough President Donovan Richards. Together, they chair the JFK Community Advisory Council, which was created at the very beginning of the project with 4 focus areas: business development for MWBEs and local businesses, career and workforce development for local residents, a focus on educational opportunities, again for local residents, and environmental stewardship projects to assure that the airport is operated at the highest levels of sustainable and environmental operating standards. In March of 2019, we opened a new community outreach office to assure engagement with the local community and our programs to date. We have a very important initiative to match construction and operations jobs with local community residents, a second chance employment program for formerly incarcerated individuals. Again, extensive STEM programs, starting with a program that will reach 300 local students, but an ambition to improve that. And then we have special training programs and outreach programs to maximize local and minority concessionaire opportunities. So I appreciate your listening. Our Queens Airport projects, we think, will set the standard for the nation. They will set the standard for the nation, not only in terms of the quality and functionality of the airport, but also for our ability to provide opportunities for the community, and in particular, obviously focused on Queens. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity. I'm privileged to share the podium with the elected officials, Carolyn Maloney and Donovan Richards, and I salute both of them as extraordinary public servants. So with that, Zach, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. That was so great. Rick Cotton, Executive Director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I'll offer a very quick summary of what he just said. In the before times, LaGuardia was LaGuardia. Now they're comparing it to a Disney character and a state. It's amazing. So without further ado, again, thank you, Rick. We brought in Bob DeSalvio, president of Genting America's East, of course, from the private sector. We got Rick Cotton here from the 4th branch of government, from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Now we're bringing in the federal representative, one of the big stars of the Democratic majority down there in Washington. It is none other than Representative Carolyn Maloney, representing New York's 12th Congressional District. She, of course, is chair of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Thank you so much for joining us, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you, and hello and good evening to everyone. I'm very honored to have been included in City and State's Queens Power 100 list, and I am delighted to be here to hear all the great things that Rick Cotton is doing, and it's exciting, all the development there. But I'm excited to be speaking with you, and I want to thank Ralph Ortega and Tom Allen for inviting me. And we have to thank City and State for what they do all year long. They bring to the forefront all that is going on in Albany, New York, and Queens. So if you really love politics and democracy and government, you have to love City and State. They are the team that highlights our successes and points out what we as elected officials need to be doing better. So tonight we recognize all the leaders who make our city and borough of Queens work. And recognized on the Power 100 list are elected officials, labor leaders, educators, and community organizers. And we are so grateful that City and State actually watches what we do and reports on what we do. And these people that are honored tonight are part of what make New York and City such a great place to live and to invest and to work in. I have the immense privilege of representing Astoria and Long Island City in Congress, along with parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn. And according to the Guinness World Records, Queens is the most diverse place in the world, with at least 138 languages spoken here. And when you look at the Power 100 list, you see just that. There are so many outstanding individuals who represent both the diversity and the accomplishment of the borough. I'm proud to represent the borough along with dynamic, newly elected assembly members, Zoran Mamdani, Jennifer Rajkumar, Kahil Anderson, and Catalina Cruz, and Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, all newly elected, representing our diversity, our leadership, our promise for tomorrow. And working with them and seeing their collective innovation and dynamic work is part of the reason why it's so exciting to be representing Congress and being part of the Queens community. Queens keeps us all on our toes. You know, I didn't set out to run for office. I didn't have any political ambitions. I was a teacher, and I taught for a program called the Welfare Education Program. It was located in East Harlem, and in Western Queens, I worked at the Hannock Center that was then led by George and Angie Duras, right here in Queens. And I often joke with Angie, I say I haven't gone very far in my life because I'm still working for Angie Duras. And together with Hannock, we put up 4 affordable housing sites here in Queens, and we're in the process of getting through the process of a new one on Steinway. Also, we put up the Valone Senior Housing at Queens Boys and Girls Club. It was also built partially with federal funding. And I saw working for the welfare education program, when we lost our money, we had to get it restored by the state, which they did. You could see the profound influence of government and what it could do to help people's lives. It could save programs like the welfare education program and build senior housing and do all of the wonderful things that can make our life better. In the American Rescue Plan, which passed Congress with the help of the entire Queens delegation that are honored here tonight, Congress members Meeks, Ming, and Ocasio-Cortez, it had over 100 billion coming to New York City and state, but it had the largest investment in education I have ever seen for the next generations of leaders in our city. And one of the things we were able to do was expand 3K funding to every school district in New York City, including 2 school districts in my district that I represent in Astoria and Long Island City. And this is just a phenomenal achievement. I am working with our borough president, Donovan, to get those dollars and to get the sites for the 3K program. And tonight we recognize educational leaders in Queens like Toby Stavisky, Chair of the Assembly Education Committee, Senator Ted Lieu, Chair of the Senate Education Committee in the Senate, Dermot Smith of UFT, LaGuardia Community College President Kenneth Adams, Brian Shanley, President of St. John's, and Queens College President Frank Wu. And what would education be without books and libraries? We're honoring also tonight Dennis Walcott, the president of Queens Public Library, one of the most beautiful libraries, I'd say, not just in Queens and New York City, probably in the whole country. And as part of the American Rescue Plan, over 350 billion of it went through the committee that I now chair. And I was proud to have a sharp pencil when it came to New York City and state, and to have secured $5.9 billion that went directly to the mayor. This is discretionary to the needs and unique needs of our city. It also had critical funding for gig workers, something that Carol Bragg from 32 BJ has been working for. We funded that for the first time in unemployment insurance and brought critical funding for infrastructure, for individuals and so many other areas. And with that money and other policies and funding from the American Rescue Plan, we have been able to get Queens residents vaccinated. It had 20 billion in vaccination in the plan, provided much aid to our small businesses, our restaurants, allocated critical funding for nutrition and food access programs. But what is funding without leaders? We need leaders on the local level to spend that money in ways that would benefit our borough. And Borough President Richards and Deputy Borough President Rhonda Benda, two honorees, ensure that that money will be distributed equitably and where it's most needed in Queens. Community leaders like Jonathan Forgash, who's been feeding Queens residents. There's more money coming in to continue those important programs for his important work. And after the CARES program passed, Queens Chamber of Commerce President Tom Gresh, also honored tonight, called me and the other congressional members and said Queens wasn't treated fairly. So believe me, our delegation prioritized in the next round to ensure that small business relief was being distributed in Queens and that those who qualified got the funding they so needed. In fact, I had the opportunity to tour and speak with owners and employees of small businesses throughout the borough and was heartened and excited to see this aid turned into action. It was a loan, but if you met certain criteria, it became into a direct aid. Queens, we all know, was the early hotbed of the COVID-19 crisis. And we needed leaders to build back better and stronger. We worked to get funding for all of our hospitals. A lot of the great research took place in our hospitals and the heroic work of our frontline workers in the medical service. I was glad to see that there were private sector leaders that were honored, including then Robin Hayes, who is the president of JetBlue, in their headquarters. It's the only airline headquarters in New York. And I know that Mr. Cotton has been working along with me and the whole delegation, trying to convince them to stay in New York and not to go to Florida. When they were looking for a headquarters, they contacted my office and they said they'd move if they would have a park in front of their office. And I went out and got 25 million and we built that park that connects Queens and Manhattan and the park in front of their headquarters. So we all got to make sure that they stay here in Queens and keep their 6,000 jobs here. When I was given the honor to fight for Queens in Congress, and I set out to do just that, at that point I was the only woman in the congressional delegation from Queens in Congress. And I feel so honored to have had the opportunity to work along with so many female elected officials here in Queens at all levels. You're honoring 13 of them in your celebration tonight. And actually on Friday, I'm going to be hosting another forum with Senator Jessica Ramos on Mother's Equal Pay Day, bringing our voices together, not only for Queens, but mothers across the nation. And where would we be without trusted advisors that are honored in Queens 100, Patrick Jenkins, Scott Levinson, Sean Crowley, Anne-Marie Anzalon. I was very pleased to see Liz Luskin and the LIC partnership honored, and it brought me back to memories as a staffer in Albany when I first began working. One of the first pieces of legislation that I authored for the city's committee was business improvement districts that allowed businesses to come together in a partnership, raising money, working together to improve the neighborhoods, and to see that concept and idea put into the ground and led so beautifully by Liz Luskin and the LIC partnership, really helping to support the businesses, the people, the needs of the people in Queens. And Queens has always played a critical role in my prioritizing my goals in Congress, starting with infrastructure. Infrastructure is in my DNA. I love working for it. And one of the first, actually the first major infrastructure project I got funded was in Queens. And there was a tunnel to nowhere between Manhattan and Queens, Manhattan 63rd Street and Queensbridge, one of the most important areas. It has the largest and most successful housing public development, not in New York, but in the whole country. And we got 300 million to build the F train connecting Queens and Manhattan, improving the quality of life of residents in Queens to move back and forth. And the billions of dollars that we got for the East Side Access, working with other members of the delegation to bring the LIRR service to the east side of Manhattan, Grand Central. But there is something that is missing, something that I've been working with Senator Gianaris on. I'm thrilled to share that I am working on a project to complete that we started, and that is to have a opening in Queens Sunny Yards. We don't have an opening into the LIRR connector. And Cotton, I hope you're listening to this, and Liz Ruskin, everybody else that's on this call, we've got to get that in the budget. I've made it my top priority, $20 million toward that project. And the Queens Connector created thousands of union jobs. And I was pleased to see so many union leaders like Edwin Christian and Pat Dolan of the Steamfitters honored. All of these projects help create jobs. I guess my prize project for Queens was 800 million to build, or it wasn't to build the new Kosciuszko Bridge, it was to refinance it and to modernize it. It was the worst bridge in the nation when I first went to office. Now it's one of the best and most modern. It's even lit up at night. It brings two communities together that I represent, Queens and Brooklyn. And I think it's one of the best bridges I've ever had the honor. When I get depressed, I just get in a car and ride back and forth because you've got a park, you've got bikes, it's got everything. It's the best bridge in New York now. And I have to mention something very important now that on mass transit. A project that we're working on in government right now is high-speed rail between Manhattan and Boston. It's a joint project request from New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts delegations. We need to get that money and we need to build it, and no one can build a better train than the MTA. The best work in the whole country has come out of the MTA, so the Fed tells me. But when a lot of governors were turning back their high-speed rail money, I went out and got some and got it directed to the Sunnyside Rail Yard to straighten out the tracks, getting ready for high-speed rail, which hopefully in the new infrastructure package that we're pushing, it will have both the entrance into the Sunnyside Yards and also the high-speed rail between the two. We all have to remember that when COVID struck, it really struck first in Queens. Some of the worst crises were here. I'll never forget the photos of the heroes and heroines at Elmhurst Hospital outfitted in garbage bags due to their lack of personal protective equipment. This was infuriating. It was risking lives. I worked to help manufacture it and start supplying it to our hospitals. We ended up actually exporting it. But because of the leaders in health and medicine in Queens, like Jacqueline Mercaria, Carmen Hernandez, and Jason Neidick, that we were allowed to recover and rebuild the role that our American leaders in Queens and other hospitals played in this COVID crisis. A lot of the alternatives, the treatments, the research all took place here in Queens and in our hospitals. And as soon as the COVID-19 vaccine was available, along with the New York delegation, and I'd say every elected official, we worked to get pop-ups, vaccination sites at Queensbridge, Ravenswood, Astoria houses to ensure equitable access to this vaccine. I'm grateful to Christopher Hanway, the executive director of Jacob Resettlement at Queensbridge, who also is recognized tonight for his partnership that we had in working together and making Queensbridge a major vaccination site for everyone in the neighborhood and working so hard to get people vaccinated. The crisis highlighted even further the incredible disparities in our great city, including the NYCHA developments. And in October, I worked with NYCHA to launch a skilled trades program here in Queens. They may expand it to borough-wide, but it is dedicated to 3 sites, Queensbridge houses, Astoria houses, Ravenswood houses in my district. What they are doing, they centralized repairs, which meant that nothing got repaired. This is bringing it back to the neighborhood with dedicated skilled trades workers in the neighborhood, responding to it. As part of this plan, we are trying to get Bishop Taylor, who is recognized, to help his Urban Outbound youth program and expand it to a youth program to train young people to make the repairs in the developments. Housing is a human right, and I'm committed to ensuring that everyone has access to it, from the youngest members to our oldest. And it is in New York becoming increasingly more difficult for housing, especially for the elderly. And I'll continue working with NYCHA residents to stop any move towards privatization of our public housing. And we're getting started with it right here in Queens. Donovan, Borough President Donovan and I are working on repairing the waterfront there at Astoria houses with city and federal monies to make that repair. There's so much to do, not enough time, but we have a lot of leaders being honored tonight in the Queens 100 that are going to bring the borough to more success and more achievements. I love the borough, I love the people that lead it, but there's so much more to do. And I have to mention, you honored some of our great leaders in the city council, Peter Vallone, and current leaders, but he will go down in history as one of the great speakers of our city. I look forward to continuing to working with all of you and the Queens community to get things done. Thank you, and thank you again for including me. And I'd be glad, Zach, to answer any questions anybody has on a federal level. It's an honor to be honored with so many outstanding leaders in our Queens borough. And we thank the publication that writes about it, talks about it, and points out our successes, our failures, and how we need to work together to do even more for Queens. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Congresswoman. That was great. Really great breakdown of all the stuff going on and how it just connects to so many different officials in the nonprofit sector, elected officials, and so on. And if anyone does have any questions for the Congresswoman, you can drop the questions in the Q&A, and I'm sure she or any of her aides that are also on the call would be happy to point you in the right direction, provide some answers. Thanks again, Congresswoman. In lieu of audience applause, I'll give you a little clap from my apartment here. Hopefully the cat didn't steal away the show when he walked by the camera. Thank you, Congresswoman. Now, without further ado, we need a president, a borough president, and there's only one for Queens, and that, of course, is Borough President Donovan Richards, who had prepared a few pre-recorded remarks for us tonight. Looks like we're having just a little bit of difficulty with the sound, but we'll get that resolved momentarily. I'm sure he's thanking City and State for putting on this great event and all the wonderful elected officials, nonprofit folks.
Hello, I'm Queens Borough President Donovan Richards. On behalf of the nearly 2.4 million residents of Queens, the world's borough, thank you for the invitation to speak today during this virtual event recognizing City and State's Queens Power 100. Let's clap it up for all of my fellow honorees who truly make Queens a better place. It is truly an honor to be recognized by City and State, an outstanding media organization devoted to providing the in-depth coverage of local government and politics and gossip in politics that cannot be found anywhere else. And even though this event is being held online due to our ongoing battle against COVID-19, I'm glad we are able to gather virtually to talk about how Queens is bouncing back from this pandemic. Thankfully, our borough and city have turned the corner regarding COVID-19, with Queens being the first county in New York State to have 1 million residents vaccinated. We are dropping restrictions, reopening our city, and looking forward to a new, more resilient normal for Queens. However, we cannot fully get back on our feet unless we defeat this disease once and for all. That's why my office continues to work with our partners in city and state government to expand vaccination opportunities so that all Queens residents and workers have easy access to the vaccine. Just last week, we held a pop-up vaccination site right in front of Queensborough Hall, and we will continue to work to bring the vaccine within easy reach of everyone in Queens and to encourage all of our residents to get the shot. We also need to strengthen our borough's economy, which has been severely battered by the effects of COVID-19. As borough president, I'm addressing the needs of our economy by aiding small businesses through programs like the Queens Small Business Grant Program, funded by a $17.5 million donation from Mets owner Steve Cohen, which has been awarding grants of up to $20,000 to small businesses in need. What a home run for our borough. Thank you to the New York Mets. Queens is deeply grateful to the New York City Economic Development Corporation, the Steve and Alexandra Cohen Foundation, and all of our partners in this program for providing vital support that has helped keep struggling Queens businesses open. My office is also connecting Queens residents with available job opportunities through our frequent online virtual job fair. And we are supporting investments that will create a dynamic economy rooted in equity and shared prosperity. One example of that is the redevelopment of Terminal 1, a project I'm proud to have worked on with my co-chair of the JFK Advisory Board, Congressmember Gregory Meeks. These investments also include $5.5 million capital funding I'm allocating to 4 of CUNY's 4 colleges in Queens. This funding, which is to be included in the fiscal year 2022 budget, will aid our economy not just by creating immediate construction jobs, but by improving CUNY's facilities so that its colleges can better prepare its students to take on the jobs of tomorrow. I am also allocating $5.5 million to upgrade the operating rooms in the intensive care unit at New York City Health and Hospitals, Elmhurst, the city-run hospital that serves so many people who were stricken with COVID-19 in Queens neighborhood that was the epicenter of the pandemic. We're also providing millions more to other healthcare institutions across Queens as well. If there is one thing the pandemic has shown us, it is the need for better healthcare for all of Queens residents. To help protect our care, I and other elected officials recently stepped in to successfully lobby against a crazy state health department proposal that would have dramatically reduced the capacity of St. John's Episcopal Hospital, the only full-service hospital in the Rockaway. But as the devastating impact of COVID-19 is shown, we need to do more to safeguard our residents' health and to address the pervasive inequities in our healthcare system. That's why I'm pushing for more community-based health centers that will offer preventative medicine that can help people avoid going into the emergency room. I'm also advocating for new hospital construction and for increasing funding to our existing hospitals, which are already doing so much with far less than they need. But despite the many challenges we face, I'm confident that Queens is well positioned to bounce back and be an even better place to live, work, and visit than ever before. One reason I'm confident is that our borough has so many wonderful restaurants, shops, and cultural attractions. Just yesterday, we announced $11 million to our cultural institutions across Queens. I'm sure these venues will attract much more visitors from both Queens residents and visitors alike this summer. As the most diverse county in the continental United States and one of the most diverse places on the planet, Queens is home to a wide variety of cultures from all over the world. This makes Queens such an attractive place to visit for those who want to experience international cultures without necessarily having to travel abroad. So the post-pandemic future of Queens certainly does look bright, and we can help make that bright future a reality by continuing to do the hard work needed to address the issues impacting the lives of Queens residents. I'm committing to doing that work for as long as I have the privilege of leading this great borough, and I look forward to working with my fellow honorees on the Queens Power 100 list, and with all of our governmental, civic, and community partners as we strive together to get the job done. Thank you once again for the invitation and the recognition today. I wish all the best to Tom Allen and the entire team at City and State as you continue to do your excellent work. And I hope all those participating today enjoy the rest of today's event. Queens is rising. Congratulations. Take care, be safe, get vaxxed. God bless you all. God bless the United States of America. Take care.
Well, that was great. I think that really said it all. You know, the interesting thing about one of Queen's members of Congress, the borough president, Rick Cotton, the head of the Port Authority, is they're so able to speak. They have such good public speaking skills. It's like they do this for a living, talking about all the big issues affecting Queens. But now we're done with the keynotes. Now we're getting to the real action, the people who actually appeared on the Queen's Power 100 list, the reading of the names. And now, without further ado, I will start at number 100. Side note, just make sure to poke whoever's next, make sure that they receive the applause I'm sure they're getting at home or wherever they're tuning into our program today. This is an event for them above anybody else. So, at number 100, we have Daniel Leone, President and CEO of Queens Public Television. At number 99, Shamsi Ali, Director of the Jamaica Muslim Center. At number 98, Jonathan Forgash, co-founder of Queens Together. Number 97, Alea Abraham, founder of the Black Resource Network. Number 96, Christopher Hanway, Executive Director of Jacob A. Reese Neighborhood Settlement. I think he got a shout out from Congresswoman Maloney a little bit ago. At number 95, we have a dynamic duo, Lance Furtado and Todd Furtado, who are respectively Executive Director and President of the King of Kings Foundation, which is in Queens, in case that wasn't clear. Number 94, Judith Zhang, Executive Director of Sunnyside Community Services. Number 93, Kay Bain, co-founder and executive director of Community Capacity Development. At number 92, Charles Boyce, president of Boyce Technologies. Number 91, Biani Garcia, trans immigrant project lead at Make the Road, New York. And at 90, Alex Camarda, Director of State Government Affairs at Charter Communications. That's our first 10. Now to the 80s. At 89, Satish Noori, attorney in charge at the Legal Aid Society, Queens Neighborhood Office. 88, Clifford Weldon, president of the Queens County Bar Association. Number 87, he's got the power, you might say, Richard David, Queens Director of Corporate Affairs at Con Edison. At number 86, Edwin Christian, business manager at the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 1414B. And at 85, Brian Simon, founder and managing partner at Hollis Public Affairs. Number 84, Patrick Dolan Jr., president of Steam Fitters Local 638. I think we've heard of them. And at number 83, Kevin Livingston, president of 100 Suits for 100 Men. Go on YouTube and check out the video I did about him once upon a time. And at 82, Carl Goodman, executive director of the Museum of the Moving Image. Maybe someday we'll be on there with this event. Number 81, Margaret Honey, president and CEO of the New York Hall of Science. Number 80, Erica Ford, founder of Life Camp. Now to the 70s, number 79, Alan Suna, chair of Silver Cup Studios. Number 78, Kevin Alexander, president and CEO, Rockaway Development and Revitalization Corporation. 77, Scott Crowley, senior vice president at Fontes Advisors. Number 76, Joanne Ariola, chair of the Queens County Republican Party. And at 75, John Sean Crowley, partner at Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron. At number 74, Berenicia Johnson Enos, president of York College. Number 73, Assembly Member Daniel Rosenthal, we know where he works. Number 72, Mitchell Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Urban Upbound. And at 71, Richard Sue, Chief Investment Officer at F&T Group. And rounding out the 70s, Jeff Wilpon and Richard Brown, partners at Sterling Project Development. Now, 69, another person who got a shout out a little bit ago, Rhonda Binda, Deputy Queens Borough President. Number 68, Stuart Steves, CEO of LaGuardia Gateway Partners. Number 67, Assembly Member Clyde Vanell. And 66, John Cho, Executive Director of the Greater Flushing Chamber of Commerce. New York City Council Member Eric Ulrich is rounding things out at 65, and at 64, Christine Mangino, President of Queensborough Community College. And at 63, Scott Levinson, founder and president of the Advanced Group. And at 62, Juke Shu, founder and CEO of Pursuit. And at 61, New York City Council member Robert Holden. And rounding things up in the 60s, Clint Plummer, CEO of Rise, Light, and Power, an apt company to be on the power list. And at 59, Bruce Flons, president and CEO of Medicis Health Network. Travis Terry is 68. He's the president of Capolino. And at number 57, a legend, Peter Vallone Sr., partner at Constantinople and Vallone Consulting. And at number 56, we got a dynamic quartet, Martha Aon, Nick Hagby, Bright Lim, and Virginia Ramos Rios, board members at New Reformers, one of our beloved sponsors of today's event. And at number 65, Anne Marie Anzalone and John Albert, partners at Bolton St. John's. At number 54, Kara Hughes, Senior Vice President, Corporate and Legislation at Kaiserer. And at number 53, Daniel Zausner, Chief Operating Officer at the USTA Billie Jean King National Tennis Center. And 52, New York City Council Member Francisco Moya. And at 51, Dermot Smythe, Queens Political Action Coordinator at the United Federation of Teachers. And at 50, Kenneth Adams, President of LaGuardia Community College. Just at the halfway point here, people, we got 50 more names, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger on our power list. At 49, Assemblymember Catalina Cruz, and one spot ahead, David Weprin, also an Assembly member and candidate for City Comptroller. And at number 47, Robert DeSalvio. I think we know who that guy is, President of Genting America's East. He, of course, was one of our first keynote speakers today. And at 46, Hal Rosenbluth, President and CEO of Kaufman Astoria Studios. And at number 45, New York City Council candidate Tiffany Caban. And at number 44, another trio, Gerard Sweeney, Michael Reich, and Franz Bowles III, founding partners of Sweeney, Reich, and Bowles. And at number 43, Seth Bornstein, Executive Director of the Queens Economic Development Corporation, of course. And at 42, Brian Shanley, President of St. John's University. And number 41 is someone I spied in the attendees list on this Zoom event, Frank Wu, President of Queens College. And at number 40, David O'Rourke, President and CEO of the New York Racing Association. We got another Assembly member, this time Alicia Heineman at 39 and Neely Rosick at 38. And at number 37, Cameron Hernandez, Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer at Mount Sinai, Queens. And at number 36, I think he might be beating out a family member here, Mark Weprin, shareholder at Greenberg Trarg. And at 35, Jason Neidish, Senior Vice President and Regional Executive Director at Northwell Health. And At number 34, Floyd and Elaine Flake, co-pastors at Greater Allen AME Cathedral. 33, Jacqueline Mukaria, president of New York Presbyterian Queens Hospital. Number 32, Peter Tu, executive director of the Flushing Chinese Business Association. And at 31, Helen Artriaga Landaverde and Neil Moore, CEOs of Elmhurst Hospital Center and Queens Hospital Center. What a busy year I'm sure they've had. And at number 30, we got a legislative quartet, Khalil Anderson, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, Zoran Mamdani, and of course, Jennifer Rajkumar, freshman Democrats and members of the New York State Assembly. And at number 29, it's Mr. Met, Steve Cohen, the owner of the New York Mets. And at number 28, Michael Wallace, president and CEO of CMW Strategies. The next one at number 27 is always flying high, Robert Hayes, CEO of JetBlue. And at 26, Taekwana Henderson Rivers, president of Connective Strategies. And at number 25, New York City Council member Jimmy Van Bramer. Number 24, Elizabeth Luskin, president of the Long Island City Partnership. And at number 23, Hope Knight, president and CEO of the Greater Jamaica Development Corporation. Ooh, and at number 22, we saw her a little bit ago, Representative Carolyn Maloney of the New York Fighting 12th Congressional District. And at number 21, Dennis Wolcott, president and CEO of Queens Public Library. At number 20, Patrick Lynch, president of the New York City Police Benevolent Association. And one spot ahead is Kyle Bragg, president of 32 BJSEIU. And at number 18, Thomas Greck, president and CEO of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. And at number 17, Patrick Jenkins, founder of Patrick B. Jenkins and Associates. Number 16, ooh, we got a couple legislators here. At number 16, State Senator James Sander Jr. At number 15, Toby Ann Stavisky. At number 14, State Senator Joseph Adabo Jr. And at number 13, State Senator Leroy Comrie. Just ahead of them across the aisle is Assemblymember Ron Kim. And at number 11, another legislative duo, but different place, Karen Kauselitz and Danny Drum, both of the New York City Council. We're at the top 10 now. Who do we got left? Still got some big names, 10 of them, in fact. At number 10, we got Rick Cotton, the executive director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who we heard from a little bit earlier, all the exciting things they're doing there. At number 9, New York City Council member Adrian Adams. At number 8, this guy has been around a while and people know him around Flushing, that's for sure, State Senator John Liu. And at number 7, the Beep, Queensborough President Donovan Richards. And at number 6, State Senator and Labor Committee Chair Jessica Ramos. Down to the last 5. Again, rack your brains. Who are we missing? I think you'll realize it as soon as they come right out of my mouth. Number 5, Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz. And at number 4, 3 letters is really all you need. AOC, of course, that's Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And at number 3, Gregory Meeks, member of Congress and of course, chair of the Queens Democratic Party. Down to the final 2. At number 2, Representative Grace Mung. And at number 1, who could it be? Drum roll. State Senate Deputy Majority Leader Michael Gianaris. That is 100 very important names for anyone that cares about what's happening in Queens, who is doing things, and most importantly, who are the 100 most powerful people. It also means our event is drawn to a close. And it's been great. We've heard from some really big people in Queens, Representative Carolyn Maloney, Rick Cotton of the Port Authority, among 2 of them, of course, the borough president, Donovan Richards, and let's not forget the great way that Bob DeSalvio, president of Genting, America's East, set us up with the first keynote remarks of the day. While this event can't last forever, I would urge you to keep the conversation going with us. We're doing another Power List next week, this time the Albany Power 100 on Wednesday, June 9th at 5 p.m. Obviously, as a senior state politics reporter at City and State, I'm very excited to MC that event. And then on Monday, June 14th at 2 p.m., we're hosting the second part of our Women in Government series focused on Juneteenth, sponsored by Spectrum. Registration for both these events is free and can be found on our website and in the chat. And then finally, please join us on Wednesday, June 16th at 12:30 p.m. as our sister organization, NYN Media, hosts the OpCon webinar, everything having to do with streamlining operations for nonprofits. They do so much important work. And I gotta say, as the MC for this event as well, it is easily the biggest nonprofit operations focused event in the tri-state area, bar none, happening on Wednesday, June 16th at 12:30 p.m. Of course, registration is free and can be found this time at nynmedia.com and of course in the chat feature. And before I say goodbye at the end of this great event, I just want to throw out one more shout out to our great sponsors, Resort World Casino, New York City, New Reformers, and of course, IUOE Local 14. And that concludes the Queen's Power 100 event for 2021, at least. Here's hoping that next year we can do it all in person, maybe with the beer and wine in hand and some great refreshments, just like all of our great live events have been at City and State. So again, thank you to our sponsors, thank you to our keynotes, and thank you to all of us, and of course, our great events team. I'm Zach Williams, Senior State Politics Reporter at City and State. Catch you next time.